The room was electric with tension, the kind that hums in the air before a storm strikes. Donald Trump leaned forward, his face set in that familiar scowl, and with a voice sharpened to cut, he barked across the chamber, "Get out!" It wasn't just loud, it was jarring, a gut punch thrown in front of America. It wasn't addressed to just anyone, but to Barack Obama, a man who had already held the highest office in the land. A man who embodied dignity in the face of hostility. The insult cracked through the room like thunder. Gasps scattered across the crowd, some muffled, some audible, disbelief pulsing through every corner. It was the kind of moment that made hearts race, the kind that would instantly etch itself into the history of political clashes, more than a put-down, more than a command. It was a challenge aimed not only at Obama, but at every American who had ever been told that they didn't belong, that they should leave the room, the job, the country. For many witnesses, Trump's words weren't just political theater, they felt like a dismissal of identity itself. But Obama didn't flinch. He didn't rise, didn't sneer back, didn't let anger twist his face. Instead, he held steady, his calm presence clashing gloriously against the heat Trump spit his way. That stillness spoke louder than any interruption, and the silence between them stretched like a drum roll of fate. The cameras froze in place, and so did the people watching, for they could see it. Something unforgettable was about to unfold.
Ow.
Something more powerful than the insult that had just rung from Trump's mouth. Before we dive into this incredible showdown, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of these political moments. Trust me, what you are about to see will blow your mind. What made the moment so heavy wasn't just Trump's arrogance. It was the centuries echoed within that single command. The story of being told "get out" has lived in classrooms, offices, neighborhoods, and borders. And now, here it was. Live for the nation to hear. Everyone leaned in, the weight of history pressing down in real time. What would Obama say? Would he strike back in fury, walk away, or transform that insult into something greater? The world held its breath, unaware that his reply would leave not only Trump, but the entire country utterly speechless. Trump's outburst might have sounded like nothing more than the heated bluster of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. But behind that single cry of "get out" rested the full weight of a nation's fractures. For years, America had been sliding into the trenches of cultural warfare, red against blue, rural against urban, rage against reason. Trump had weaponized this divide, carving his political persona out of fury, disruption, and the unrelenting art of conflict. He was never a man of subtlety. He was the chaos candidate who thrived in portraying calm as weakness and disruption as dominance. And yet standing across from him was Barack Obama, a figure who had long been cast as the antithesis of all that chaos. If Trump was the rallying cry that turned grievance into spectacle, Obama was the steady voice that articulated hope in the face of doubt. Where Trump thrived on tearing down, Obama became known for building visions. Where Trump raised fists, Obama raised words. Their collision was never inevitable. It was historic in its contrast. A battle between two poles that framed America's identity crisis in living color. What boiled in that chamber, as Trump barked at Obama, was more than political theater. It was the distillation of two competing visions for the very soul of America. Trump's cry wasn't really about getting Obama out of the room. It was about erasing his presence, negating what his leadership symbolized. Obama's presidency had embodied inclusion, the idea that voices once silenced could rise to the highest seat of power. To dismiss him as unworthy, to command him to leave, wasn't just personal, it was an attack on that legacy of belonging. That was why the audience's unease shifted so quickly into a deeper recognition. They weren't only watching one man try to shout down the other, they were witnessing a confrontation that represented their own anxieties. For everyday people, it echoed what so many had faced in quieter spaces, being told their qualifications didn't matter. Their accent didn't belong, their skin color was a mark against them. This was not just about Obama versus Trump. It was about a clash between dignity and arrogance, service and spectacle, belonging and exclusion. And the truth is, this wasn't the first time Trump had tried to diminish Obama's presence. Long before sitting across from him in that tense chamber, he had worked tirelessly to undermine the very idea that Obama belonged in the presidency at all. From peddling falsehoods about his origins to mocking his leadership on national stages, Trump had built a reputational crusade against Obama as a way to rally his base and frame himself as the antidote to what Obama represented. This outburst, then, wasn't a new insult. It was the culmination of years of antagonism sharpened to a single explosive command. The stakes could not have been higher. It wasn't simply one clash of personalities. It was the continuation of a battle that defined two political epochs. On one side, the politics of rage, rooted in disruption, where volume was mistaken for vision and insult for impact. On the other, the politics of calm purpose, where dignity stood taller than derision, and where words could dismantle arrogance not through fury but through clarity. Those in the room could feel that symbolism radiating with every breath, every silence, every stare between the two men. This wasn't just theater bound to the chamber floor. It was a story about legacy, identity, and the course of a fractured country trying to decide whether to embrace its progress or retreat into its fears. The command "get out" was meant to diminish, but what it had really done was elevate the moment into a test of character and vision. One man furious at being challenged, the other prepared to prove why arrogance always collapses against dignity. The room was tight with suspense, social media already beginning to buzz, and the drama building like a storm about to break. Viewers knew something bigger was coming. They leaned forward in living rooms, in classrooms, and workplaces, sensing that history was about to sharpen its pen. The stage was set for a collision that no one would forget. Donald J. Trump was never built on policy papers or careful reasoning. His rise in American politics was forged in something louder: spectacle, outrage, and the art of turning conflict into currency. From the very first moments he descended that golden escalator, he understood that the most effective way to dominate the conversation was to crush opponents beneath insult. Where others sought to persuade with data or ideas, Trump aimed to belittle, to brand, to reduce foes into caricatures before they could ever strike back. The nicknames told the story. Crooked Hillary, Low Energy Jeb, Little Marco weren't arguments, they were weapons. Trump's smirk as he cast them out did more damage than full speeches from others. Crowds roared, headlines exploded, and suddenly he wasn't the man stumbling through traditional politics. He was the man reinventing it as a gladiatorial spectacle where dignity was irrelevant and dominance was everything. For Trump, it was always domination above dialogue. In rallies, he turned entire audiences into collaborators in these dismissals. A tilt of his head, a sarcastic shrug, a hand chopping the air with that unmistakable gesture. These were his tools, signaling superiority without substance. He basked in the ability to silence critics through humiliation rather than reason, pausing for the eruption of cheers from followers who fed off the theater of degradation. When critics pointed to inaccuracies or contradictions, Trump never conceded. He waved them away, scoffing at reporters as fake news, smirking at fact-checkers as though they were gnats buzzing around him. Accountability slid off his shoulders with the ease of a man who had convinced himself that loyalty was worth more than truth. In Trump's world, it didn't matter if the statement was flawed or the promise impossible. What mattered was whether it enforced his dominance and secured the crowd's devotion. That philosophy defined his administration. Loyalty over integrity, showmanship over service. Allies who bent unconditionally to his will remained secure. Those who dared question him were cast out, mocked, or turned into examples. He ruled not through vision, but through fear of humiliation, ensuring that the spectacle was always larger than the subject matter. The cinematic images piled up over the years. There he was behind a podium, smirking as he told his supporters how easily he could dismantle any critic. There he was in the White House briefing room, brushing aside pointed questions with an impatient wave of the hand, glaring at journalists before barking their names like schoolchildren to be disciplined. There he was at international summits, shirking formality, interrupting leaders, basking in being the loudest voice in the room, even when he wasn't the wisest. His presence was less a statesman than a stage actor, gripping his audience by sheer force of bravado. And yet, beneath the layers of theater, pattern emerged so clearly it could not be ignored. Truth was always expendable if bluster could replace it. Respect was always secondary if domination could be enforced. He wasn't interested in building bridges across divisions. He was interested in burning them down, so that all attention remained on him, standing alone among the ashes. That thirst for attention, that addiction to spectacle, became his trademark. It made him the hero to some who felt rage finally had a voice, and the villain to others who saw through the bluster to the corrosion beneath. But whichever side people fell on, one truth was undeniable. Trump thrived in conflict. He sought it, demanded it, built his very identity on being the lightning rod that split every storm. It wasn't enough for him to win. He had to belittle the opponent into nothingness. He could never simply debate. He had to drown out. If an adversary presented facts, he undercut them with insults. If someone dared to interrupt him, he barked louder to regain the stage. To Trump, volume was proof of power, sneers were evidence of superiority, and cutting interruptions were the only facts that mattered. Every smirk at rallies, every contemptuous wave during hearings, every mocking tone used on global platforms reinforced one central truth. For Trump, politics wasn't about governance, it was entertainment. America wasn't an audience of citizens. It was an arena of spectators who would cheer his swagger and boo his villains as he choreographed them. That's why the insult hurled at Obama carried such edge. Trump wasn't speaking as a president addressing a peer. He was performing, relishing the role of a man feeding his brand on conflict with an opponent whose calm threatened to dismantle everything he had built. To roar "Get out" at Obama wasn't policy, wasn't statesmanship, wasn't analysis. It was theater, an arrogant performance meant to erase and belittle, to reduce Obama into a character in his script of domination. Trump's entire career had followed this script: sneer, smirk, insult, repeat. And it always worked, because so often his opponents lost balance in the storm. Thrown off by his sheer disregard for convention. That was Trump's confidence, that no one could survive his brand of bludgeoning arrogance. So when he turned toward Obama, his trademark sneer suggested, he thought victory was already his. Long before the world knew the name Barack Obama. Before stadiums erupted at the sound of his voice, and before history etched his name into the fabric of America's highest ways. Office? He was simply the son of a young mother navigating hardship, a boy raised in a world that did not promise him power. His roots reached across continents with a Kenyan father and a white Kansan mother. A testament to difference and diversity at a time when America struggled to embrace either. He carried within him the story of an outsider, someone who understood from childhood the sting of being made to feel like you don't quite belong. Obama's earliest lessons came not from elite boardrooms or gilded families, but from the ordinary grind of life lived in humble surroundings. He saw resilience firsthand as his mother worked and studied, trying to build opportunity not just for herself but for her son. He grew up on values that stressed the dignity of education, the importance of persistence, and the moral responsibility to leave a place better than you found it. While other boys dreamed of fleeting triumphs, he quietly absorbed the belief that service mattered more than spectacle. Education became his first great champion. In classrooms, he stood out not because of inherited privilege, but because of a restless mind that wanted to ask harder questions. Where others flashed arrogance, Obama offered curiosity. Where others used confidence to mask ignorance, he used humility to carve out understanding. From the University of Chicago classrooms where he later taught, to the busy law libraries where he studied, he learned the power of words when wielded with precision, and the power of restraint when wielded with patience. But what truly separated him was not merely intellect, it was empathy. Obama didn't just walk in and dominate spaces, he walked in and listened. That skill was sharpened not at podiums, but on the streets of Chicago as a community organizer. There, among factory workers, struggling families, and neighborhoods starved of investment. He cut his teeth on conversations that would shape his political philosophy forever. He listened to parents desperate for better schools, to churches, fighting to keep young people safe, to countless voices society often ignored. And in that listening, he learned leadership is not simply telling people what they need to hear, is honoring what they already know. This foundation gave him a power that did not roar but resonated. At rallies, he could step up to the microphone and wrap crowds in a calm energy that stirred more deeply than anger ever could. Cinematically, you can picture him there under the blaring lights, speaking of hope and change, words that might sound fragile in lesser hands, but in his became armor. While others exchanged barbs, he painted visions. Where political opponents sneered, he spoke with measured cadence, forcing even critics to acknowledge the undeniable. This was a man who carried gravitas without arrogance. On international stages, too, Obama's demeanor was unmistakable. No matter the setting, whether addressing thousands in Berlin or discussing nuclear disarmament with adversaries, he radiated a presence that did not need to shout to be heard. He represented America not with anger and chest-pounding, but through steady reason and the conviction that dignity was itself a form of power. He wielded calm like a sword, and he never mistook civility for weakness. And yet, for all the glamour of high office, it was the quiet strength in smaller, unseen moments that sealed his character. A conversation with a young immigrant navigating the complexities of identity, a handshake with a teacher whose community school barely kept the lights on, a hug shared with the family of a soldier whose sacrifice went largely unseen. These moments embodied Obama's leadership not as a brand, but as a deeply human reflection of service. That was why insults hurled his way never just landed on him alone. When Trump or anyone else dismissed him as illegitimate or shouted for him to get out, it carried the echoes of dismissals countless Americans felt in their own lives. Obama represented more than his personal story. He carried the stories of millions told in boardrooms they didn't belong, classrooms where their questions were brushed aside, neighborhoods where their citizenship was doubted. When Trump barked at him, those millions heard the same barbed, sneered they had known all their lives. But this is where Obama's distinction mattered most. Instead of roaring back, instead of collapsing into rage or defensiveness, his strength lay in meeting cruelty, not with capitulation or fury, but with composure. He let arrogance reveal itself in its ugliness, and then, often with just a single line, reframed the entire confrontation. His intellect had prepared him, his empathy grounded him, and his patience made him unshakable. It is precisely this demeanor that made Trump's insult so risky. Because against a man like Obama, anger doesn't thrive. Rage feeds against chaos, but calm starves it. Trump wielded disruption as his weapon. But Obama had built his entire leadership on persistence, on dignity, on resilience, honed over decades of being underestimated. Cinematic flashes of Obama's journey pass before us like film reels. The child poring over homework while his mother taught him lessons about perseverance. The young man walking Chicago streets listening to neighbors explain their struggles with jobs and schools. The rising public servant standing in front of the Democratic National Convention, electrifying the nation with the audacity of hope. The president facing down crises while speaking not to the fever pitch of fear, but to the quiet call of resolve. Every moment crafted him into the kind of leader who understood that history's greatest victories don't always belong to those who shout loudest, but to those who carry themselves with the steadiness to outlast storms. In that chamber, opposite Trump's sneer, Obama embodied every ounce of this history. His calm was a reflection of the child he once was, of the families he had served, of the people he knew were watching with their pride and pain intertwined. To answer Trump was not just to defend himself, but to defend them. Every immigrant, every marginalized voice, every dismissed worker, they sat invisibly with him in that chair. And so when Trump growled, "Get out," Obama's poise became more than his own, became representative of millions standing on his shoulders. And though Trump thought he was roaring triumphantly into that room, what he had really done was set up a conflict larger than himself. Obama's reply would not simply echo back as one man's response. It would carry with it the validation and vindication of countless others who had waited to see arrogance checked by dignity. Those qualities, patience, dignity, resilience, were about to be tested in the harshest spotlight imaginable. The chamber pulsed with unease, as if even the walls themselves recognized the significance of what was unfolding. Trump leaned in again, his voice carrying the grating mix of command and contempt that had long been his calling card. He didn't stop at the sharp words already delivered. He pushed harder. Each interruption, each barked taunt, tore through the air like jagged glass. Get out. You don't belong here. Get out. The repetition wasn't about making a point, it was about overpowering the room, bullying it into submission by sheer volume. Spectators felt the imbalance reverberate across the chamber. Their eyes darted between the two figures, drawn like moths to fire toward every flicker of tension. The powerful image was unmistakable. Trump roaring, gesturing, lashing out with words meant to sting, and Obama sitting, calm and deliberate, as if he understood something deeper than the present storm. Some within the audience leaned forward, their breaths tight, waiting to see if Obama would collapse under the weight of such aggression, or if he was quietly arranging the perfect moment for a strike that would cut deeper than any insult. The interruptions continued, each one sharper, more desperate. Trump sought not only to attack, but to deny Obama the very oxygen to offer a response. His face reddened with the effort, his hands chopping the air as if to pound down the space. Between them, cameras captured it all, the sneer, the impatience, the performance designed as much for spectacle as for substance. The performance had worked countless times before, but tonight it faced the slow, steady power of silence. Obama didn't give back what was hurled at him. He let Trump's fury spend itself, crashing louder and louder until the noise became grating rather than commanding. His composure became a mirror, reflecting the rage back on its source. Viewers watching from home began to recognize the contrast, one man losing control of his own words, the other carefully biding his time, measuring his next move with precision. That precision was what made audiences lean even closer. There was a visible shift in the room, subtle at first but undeniable as seconds ticked into suspension. Trump thought he was dominating, but in truth, his bluster had become a vacuum waiting to be filled by the reply that had not yet come. Obama adjusted slightly in his chair, a signal so small it was almost imperceptible. But it carried the weight of inevitability. The man who had faced crises far greater than insults needed no hurry. He needed only the right moment. The word, "Get out," no longer hung in the room as Trump's alone. It became something larger, an echo across the decades. 2 immigrants told their accents disqualified them. 2 women told meetings weren't their place. 2 students told their dreams were too big for classrooms that weren't built for them. 2 workers dismissed by CEOs convinced power was inherited, not earned. Get out had become the anthem of arrogance, repeated over generations. And now, it was being thrown at the man who had already proven that presence could itself be a rebuke to exclusion. That was why the spectators felt more than awkward tension. They felt the weight of history pressing down. Their hearts drummed not just with curiosity, but with an unspoken plea. Will dignity respond? Will steadiness speak? Will arrogance finally meet its wall? Obama's face gave little motion, but his stillness radiated louder than Trump's roars. The more the insults poured out, the clearer it became that the silence was not weakness, was intention. He was not avoiding the battle. He was orchestrating it. Each pause was a step in building suspense, each calm breath constructing the stage upon which a single strike could flip the moment entirely. The audience could sense it. Every cough, every shuffle of paper, every uneasy glance underscored the anticipation swelling thick in the air. Social media already began buzzing. Clips of Trump's interruptions looped across screens, with captions taunting, waiting, when will Obama answer? And then, amid the chaos and repetition, you felt it shift. The room, restless seconds before, seemed to fall in line as though waiting for the conductor to lift a baton. The shouting grew repetitive, hollow, desperate. The silence across the aisle sharpened. And from that silence, something was about to emerge, to match the noise, to match the noise. Not a rant to battle fury with fury, but something sharper, colder, unforgettable. And then came the moment no one expected. The room had been crackling with Trump's barrage of noise, his voice echoing like an unwelcome storm. He had hollered, snarled, cut across the air with dismissive waves of his hand. He had spat the words, "Get out," enough times to make them less an argument and more chant. And just when it seemed the rhythm of his interruptions might smother the chamber into nothingness, the rhythm snapped. Obama finally raised his head, leaned a fraction closer to the microphone, and let the quiet settle around him like armor. He didn't rush. He didn't match Trump's frenzy with frenzied energy of his own. Simply reclaimed the silence. The weight of it pressed down on the chamber until even the coughs and murmurs sunk away. Then, with a tone colder than glass under ice, Obama delivered his reply. "I'm here because the people sent me. I'll leave when they tell me." And no amount of yelling changes that truth. The words cut through Trump's roar like a scalpel through fabric, precise, deliberate, surgical. It wasn't just what he said, but how he said it. His cadence was steady, his breathing calm, his tone one that neither begged for applause nor demanded submission. He spoke as though the truth did not need shouting, only stating. The effect was cinematic. The camera and every eye in the room pulled to Trump's face instantly. His smirk faltered only slightly at first, but enough to reveal the uneasy crack running beneath it. His lips pressed together, his jaw tightened, his eyes shifted rapidly in calculation. For the first time in the exchange, it looked as though his performance had been interrupted, not by another insult hurled his way, but by dignity staring back at him. That moment of silence after Obama's words lasted seconds, but it stretched into eternity for those watching. The chamber was frozen, unsure if they were allowed to react or if they were simply required to witness. It was not loud applause, but the absence of it that gave Obama's words seismic force. People leaned closer, listening with bodies suddenly still, the way one leans forward to catch a verdict in a courtroom. Trump tried to push in a scoff, a smirk, the flicker of a reflexive comeback. But the air had shifted, and everyone could sense it. His momentum had collapsed. His voice, once roaring across the chamber, now felt deflated, hushed by the calm force sitting opposite him. Obama's stillness amplified the contrast. While Trump shuffled through his notes, tapping a table, searching for something to latch onto, Obama simply placed his hands flat, his gaze unwavering. That image alone became the story. It was no longer about Trump's command to get out. It was about the weight of Obama's refusal to be erased. But Obama didn't stop with one line. He allowed the silence to linger, then wove words. Together, like strands of steel, respect isn't given by raising your voice. It's earned by standing for something bigger than yourself. Trump's smirk vanished completely. His lips parted slightly, as if his retort had caught on his own tongue. Across the chamber, some spectators shifted in their seats, eyebrows raised, their eyes darting toward one another as if to say, "Did that just happen?" The power dynamic had reversed, and it had happened in 3 sentences. He says, "Get out." Obama continued, voice even, deliberate, and sharp. But the people who built this country were told the same. They didn't leave. They stayed. They built. They fought. And because they did, we're still here. Those words cracked. The chamber, wide open, was no longer simply about Trump versus Obama. In an instant, the insult turned on its head. What was meant to diminish had now been magnified into something universal, a message to immigrants, to dreamers, to the marginalized, to everyone who had been told in one way or another to get out. Obama had not only defended himself, he reframed an attack on his presence into a defense of theirs. The cameras didn't need applause to sell the moment. They just needed Trump's face. His cheeks flushed darker, his jaw twitched. He blinked and looked away for a second too long. A human tell caught live. Where arrogance had once filled his expression, unease now flickered. It was the still shots taken from that moment. Obama still, precise, calm. Trump visibly rattled that would soon circle the globe. But in that moment, none of that had happened yet. All anyone in the chamber knew was that they had just seen arrogance punctured by poise. And then came the pause. Obama stopped. He leaned back slightly, giving no dramatic flourish, offering no widened arms to court applause. The pause itself became the punctuation. The silence pressed again. And this time, it wasn't discomfort, it was awe. Online, clips began to circulate. Almost instantly, Twitter feeds filled with transcripts, hashtags erupting with captions, hashtag speechless Trump, hashtag Obama shutdown, hashtag get out reply. TikTok edits froze on Obama's steady gaze, contrasting it with Trump's faltering expression. Memes layered his line with iconic music, looping Trump's fading smirk over and over again. But inside the room, nothing was louder than the quiet. Spectators staring at each other wordlessly. Sharp breaths pulled in but never immediately let go. Like the entire room was holding the weight of what they had just witnessed. It wasn't rage that silenced Trump. It wasn't shouting that broke his spell. It was calm dignity delivered with the certainty of ice. Obama had redefined the confrontation. It wasn't one man trying to kick another out of a room. It was a reminder that truth cannot be forced out. Truth stays and speaks, even when arrogance demands silence. Trump shifted again, looking down as he straightened his papers, a move meant to project indifference, but in that moment, more clearly read as retreat. The performance, once blazing in volume and taunts, had been gutted by a single measured voice, and so the line lived on. Not just spoken, but etched into memory. Obama's counterpunch that was not a punch. His dismantling that did not require drama. It wasn't just a comeback. It was dismantling. And the ripple effects would shake far beyond that room. The silence inside the chamber had barely settled before the noise outside erupted. It began with a tremor on Twitter, a single clip. Clipped from the live broadcast, posted by a wide-eyed spectator who couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. 10 minutes later, hashtags began to pop like sparks. Hashtag speechless Trump, hashtag Obama shutdown, hashtag get out reply. Within an hour, they weren't just trending in the United States, they were climbing globally. The internet had seized the moment, packaging it, remixing it, and replaying it on a loop that seemed incapable of ending. TikTok got its first slice within minutes. Creators were quick to splice Obama's ice-cold retort with slow-motion filters, dramatic violin swells, and captions. In bold red and blue, the moment Trump froze. Some videos cut between Trump's unraveling expression and clips of boxing knockouts or sports highlights, labeling Obama's words as the unseen punch that floored the room. Others laid popular hip-hop tracks under the exchange, adding beats to each pause of Obama's calm delivery so that every sentence dropped like a lyric. Millions of views poured in, one TikTok after another, building a chorus of digital delight at watching arrogance crack before composure. On Instagram Reels, short clips spread like wildfire, turned into memes within the hour. The most popular was a carousel of Trump mid-sneer, followed by the caption, "Before the clapback," then Obama mid-delivery with "after the clapback." The final panel? Trump's stammer frozen, his face tightening into the exact moment. The insult had flipped back at him, accompanied simply by the word speechless. Comments flooded each post, tens of thousands tagging friends with remarks like, "You have to watch this pure gold," or "This is everything I needed today." Twitter threads spun into essays. Political commentators, late-night comedians, and even celebrities far outside the political world joined the fray. A Grammy-winning artist retweeted Obama's lines with fire emojis. This is the definition of mic drop. Professional athletes quoted it after their games, inserting the gif of Trump's stunned face into celebratory highlights. One comedian staged a parody sketch within hours, mimicking Trump's interruptions only to collapse into silence the moment Obama's cutting words landed. The parody itself trended as high as the original clip. Cable news wasted no time either. One network labeled it, "The clapback heard across America," plastering the line across Chiron bars as commentators replayed the clip every 15 minutes. Another network, historically critical of Obama, tried to spin the moment as dramatic but inconsequential, yet even their footage replayed Trump's faltering expression in slow motion, betraying that the visual impact was too seismic to be diluted. Law professors began pointing out Obama's rhetorical technique, noting the way he had reframed Trump's insult into a universal defense of belonging. Speech coaches dissected his cadence, dubbing it a masterclass in restraint as power. Beyond commentary, ordinary supporters found themselves deeply moved. Social feeds filled with proud declarations. When he defended himself, he defended all of us who have been told to get out. Families shared the clip as validation for years of dismissal. Teachers played it in classrooms as an example of rhetoric turned into history. Activists reframed his reply in graphics that read like slogans. Stay, build, belong. Supporters did not let it stand alone as a meme. They elevated it as inspiration. A rallying cry that transcended joke sharing. And entered the canon of moments that felt important for democracy itself. Trump, however, found himself cast by nearly every corner of the internet as the man undone in seconds. Memes branded him with captions like, "Lost the room in 15 seconds," or "Domination denied." Wary of amplifying the viral avalanche that showcased their leader's uncharacteristic stammer into silence. For a man who thrived on controlling the narrative, this reversal felt brutal. The very stage he had tried to seize became the courtroom, proving his instability. His volume laid bare as impotence in the face of genuine composure, but of support. For Obama surged with laughter, delight, and pride, the undercurrent ran deeper than humor. For communities long marginalized, this wasn't just funny, it was cathartic. Trimming Trump's sneer into GIFs carried joy, yes, but beneath the fun lay something heavier. It was proof, visible on screen, that arrogance could crumble. That being told to get out didn't have to end in resignation. That dignity, when sharpened with truth, could hold its ground and flip an insult into affirmation. One headline summed it up with clarity and weight. The clapback heard across America is about more than Trump. For all the social media frenzy, the hashtags, the memes, the parodies, beneath it was a recognition few could deny. Obama's words had carried. More than entertainment, they had carried a truth the nation desperately needed to hear. Because beyond the viral moments, beyond the clicks and retweets, this exchange carried a moral weight much heavier than any trend could hold. In the calm that lingered after Obama's words, something far greater than a debate rebuttal settled into the consciousness of the nation. Trump's insult had been meant as dismissal, an attempt to erase, to command silence through volume and brute force. But instead of shrinking under the weight of get out, Obama transformed it into a declaration of resilience. His quiet precision reframed the insult into a lesson. Qualification is not handed down by arrogance, but earned through service, patience, and dignity. That was the moral marrow of the moment. Trump may have brandished his anger as proof of dominance, but Obama revealed that true leadership was never about shouting the loudest. It was about listening. It was about representing more than oneself. And above all, it was about showing up again and again to serve a community, even when arrogance demanded you walk away. His words connected not because they burned with rage, but because they glowed with recognition. When Obama said he stayed because the people sent me, he wasn't speaking only for himself. He was giving voice to millions who understood exactly what it meant to be told they don't belong. Immigrants who had heard the same sneer echo in job applications, students sidelined because of their accents, women dismissed in conference rooms, workers brushed aside in factories, entire communities marginalized by systems stacked against them. His statement became their vindication, and in this contrast lay the lesson America needed. Arrogance is loud, but shallow. It dominates the room for a season, but it carries no roots. Dignity, in contrast, may not always blast from podiums, but it endures. Where arrogance provokes laughter or shock for a moment, dignity resounds for generations. Obama's stillness that night reminded the country and the world that arrogance cannot silence authenticity, and no insult is strong enough to erase belonging once it is claimed. This wasn't merely a political point to score against Trump. This was larger than party lines, larger than ideologies. It was about self-worth, about identity, about human dignity. Anyone who had ever walked into a room and felt eyes questioning their right to be there saw themselves in that moment. Obama's refusal to back down, his transformation of insult into affirmation, felt like the long-delayed answer to their own silent battles. In that chamber, and across every living room that replayed the clip, Americans who were tired of being told to get out now saw proof: you can stay, you can speak, you can belong. The resonance of that truth was electric. It wasn't the kind of victory that breeds complacency. It was the kind of validation that drives action, the kind that whispers to the young girl doubting herself, "You are qualified," the kind that emboldens immigrant families to hold their heads higher, the kind that encourages everyday people to carry themselves with quiet strength, even when arrogance tries to push them aside. Obama's lesson expanded far past Trump's sneer. It became a creed for anyone who understood the weight of exclusion. And so, the true mic drop was not the silencing of Trump. It was the uplifting of everyone who needed to see arrogance collapse before dignity. For once, politics didn't sound like distant noise or empty promises. It sounded personal, like a message written directly into the marrow of those who had spent years fighting to belong. That is why this encounter transcended partisan squabbles. It wasn't just a Democratic victory, nor a Republican loss. It was a human one. It was a reminder that worth is not given by the loud, nor validated by the arrogant. It is embodied in resilience, in service, and in authenticity. In one moment, the chamber was transformed into a classroom. The nation received its lesson. Dignity greater than arrogance, authenticity greater than elitism. The emotional crescendo swelled not in applause but in recognition. Watching Trump falter before Obama's composure became a parable. You don't defeat arrogance by mirroring it. You defeat it by refusing to bend. Calm assurance isn't passive. It's powerful. It doesn't shout. It outlasts. And when wielded at the right moment, it dismantles every insult meant to break you. That is the lesson that carried far beyond the chamber. Simple reminder that the world will, time and again, tell you that you don't fit, that you don't belong, that you should get out. But belonging doesn't come from their permission. It comes from the courage to stand tall and stay, even in the face of arrogance. Obama's reply was more than defense. It was a message. You are enough, no matter who tries to push you aside. And those qualities, patience, dignity, resilience, reminded the nation not just how to survive an insult, but how to flip it into a truth that inspires. Because in the end, the real power of that moment wasn't what Trump lost. It was what millions gained, the courage to stay. What began as a thunderous insult, barked with arrogance and certainty, ended as a moment. Etched into political memory, Barack Obama's calm, piercing reply, a true mic drop that turned the room upside down. Trump's outburst, meant to dominate and dismiss, instead collapsed under the weight of dignity. His voice grew smaller, his smirk evaporated, while Obama's stillness, his eloquence, became the defining beat of the night. The entire exchange took on the feel of something larger, not just one man silencing another, but arrogance itself being exposed for the hollowness it always was. And that is the payoff we carry. For every spectator who leaned forward in disbelief, for every person at home who felt chills run up their spine at the precision of that reply, this was proof that dignity defends itself, and in doing so, defends us all. Obama didn't just answer Trump. He answered for every voice told to leave, every person told they weren't enough, every dream told it didn't belong. This channel exists to keep those stories alive, the moments when truth stands taller than taunts, when justice pierces through arrogance, when composure dismantles chaos. If this story left you inspired, if it made you feel seen, if it reaffirmed your belief that calm strength outlasts loud swagger, then don't just watch, help us amplify it. Hit the like button, subscribe for more cinematic clashes. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that arrogance doesn't win forever, because these moments matter. They don't just entertain, they remind us who we are and what we are capable of. Because sometimes one ice-cold line can silence a storm.